Hello, Garland Nixon here. And yes, the EU is broke. Yes, it's isolated. And yes, it's led by absolute half-wits. We got a lot to talk about. Let's talk. Hello. Whoops. Sorry about that. I am sitting here, speaking of led by goons. Hey, perhaps this channel is led by goons. I'm trying to figure this thing out. Just trying to playing with my sound, making sure that my sound was up and ready to go. So let's talk about what's going on now. One of the things that's happening, the Trump team has let out their national security strategy. Oh, what a piece of work that is, right? And it's interesting because it is extremely contradictory. We don't want to run the world. We can't dominate the world. We can't be the hegemon anymore. However, we still have to dominate the Asia, the Pacific, and we still have to dominate the Western Hemisphere, and we still have to decide China's economy, right? Isn't that interesting? Yes, China's economy. They said they have to make China's economy so it makes household goods. Don't you just love that? Man, that is powerful. You can determine what China's allowed to sell. Why don't you give them a list of the household goods? Like you can make mops, but you can't make irons because maybe somebody could weaponize iron. I mean, irons, you could burn somebody with an iron. I don't know. It is preposterous. It is absurd. It's laughable. And I think it aligns with what we're seeing in the EU in that we're seeing a deterioration in the West philosophically and intellectually. And I don't mean intellectual capacity. When you talk about when you talk about somebody being stupid, somebody being an idiot, dare I say a goon, right? One of the things that I think people get mixed up with is like innate intellectual capacity, right? How much computing power did someone have between their ears? Do they have a quantum computer, or do they have like a Fisher Price squeezy toy, the kind of thing that you give your dog and it likes to bite on? Dogs and little teeny children love those kind of sounds. So is your brain a quantum computer that's roaring away at multi-trillion dollar trillion calculations per second, or is it just going wee, 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 right? I tend to think that that's an oversimplification of the human brain, but I'll put it to you like this. Let me put it like this. I am a person, I used to think I had a bad memory, but eventually I realized I'm like the most ADD person in the world, right? And an ADD person does this. I've got this pen in my hand and I lost the pen. I don't remember it, where it is. Is it because I have a bad memory, or is it because I'm talking to you and somebody goes, "Hey, Garland," and I go, "Huh?" And when I look over here, the pin's just gone. I don't go, "Let me put this pin down. And now let me focus on this new thing." Garland, huh? And the pin's gone. And like, where's the pin? What pin? Oh, crap. I don't know what I did with it, right? It doesn't mean that I have a bad memory, but the situation presents itself as though I have a bad memory because I'm not, shall we say, very good at transitioning from focusing on one thing to another. It's just memory wipe. Okay. So here's my point. When we talk about somebody's intellectual capacity, when we talk about they're stupid or smart, it doesn't mean their intellectual capacity. It means how they think presents themselves as being stupid or smart. So that's why people are like, "I don't understand that person. He has a PhD. How can he be so stupid?" Well, that PhD doesn't mean it's a research degree. It doesn't mean you're stupid or smart. In my day, I've had a lot of people that worked for me that had far more education than I did. And I've been around people who were very well educated, who I was shocked by their decision-making abilities, right? Stunned, dare I say, by their. So the idea that a person is smarter, people use those words, "That's so stupid, that's so smart." Well, there's good decisions and bad decisions. So we talk about the decision-making process and what do you base your decision-making process on, right? So here's my point. I'm looking at the EU, and like a hologram, like any little part of the hologram represents the whole of the hologram, right? if you look at the EU leadership, it represents what the EU is, right? That's why I said Kaja Kallas, whatever, however you pronounce her name, Kaja Kallas, right? I look at her and I'm going to use this word. I see one of the stupidest people that this universe could create. You know, her the level of stupidity that I see when I look into Kaja Kallas's eyes, it's like looking into the void. You know, it's like when you look into see one of these microscope, when you take these telescopes like the Hubble, and they take the deep space field and they look out into the blackness and they see 10,000 galaxies, and you know that if you look in between those you'd find 10,000 more, and in between those you find, and that there's an infinite number of galaxies. That's the level of stupidity. That's the when you think of the issue of stupidity, that's what you think of Kaja Kallas, right? And that is, I mean, here's a person who, when she was president or prime minister, whatever it was, let me see, when she was that, right, she had like a 20% approval rating. Uh, let's see if we can find it. Estonia. Uh, let's see, she was a female prime minister. And when you look at her, when she resigned to become the high representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs, she had like a 20% approval rating. Okay, so she failed. You know the term, the term failed upward. She failed, and then they appointed her to this super really high position. And it's like, okay, why would they do that when she failed, when she only had a 20% approval rating? Well, I think that's why. Because the reason she had a 20% approval rating was because she didn't really she was a globalist. She didn't really care about her own country, and she was concerned with at that time, particularly, she was a Russia hater. And, you know, it was like this. Okay, we need somebody in charge. Who hates Russia the most? Well, I can't think of anybody that hates Russia more than Kaja Kallas. There we go. That's the only thing. It didn't matter. Nothing really mattered. She fit the criteria that they needed for the job. And the fact that she had a 20% approval rating was almost like icing on the cake. They understood that she was disliked by her people, which meant that she was that's like the definition of the globalist term that you use, right? That means you don't care about your people. And the kind of person that they want running things is the kind of person that doesn't care about their people. So you already fit the bill. They already know when you're going to bring you in, the people in your country hate you, so that they don't like you, they don't approve of you. So that means that we know that you have no thoughts about them. You don't care about them. You're not looking out for them, which means you're looking out for number one, and you will help us to do whatever we need to do, no matter how much it hurts your people. In fact, I think one of the this is this is a great story. I just sent it to a few people. You're going to love this. Latvia, right? Which is, you know, one of the barking Baltic chihuahuas, right? A major Latvian gas storage is only 58% full ahead of the winter heating season. Local lawmaker Andris Kolbuks has warned. The MP said that the stocks may not even be enough to see the Baltic nation through 3 months. The EU, of which Latvia is a member, drastically reduced imports of Russian oil and gas following the escalation of the Ukraine conflict. Moscow, in turn, redirected a significant part of its energy supplies to Asian countries. The European bloc has been increasingly reliant on imports of more expensive liquefied natural gas to replace Russian gas, which had previously accounted for some 40% of the EU's total consumption. Kohlbergs wrote on X, if the gas storage facility is depleted at this rate, we won't even last 3 months. He noted that at present, there is no sign of additional supply from LNG terminals. The low level of gas stored at the Konakas Inkolns facility could have long-term adverse effects on Latvia's energy security, the lawmaker warned, right? So, what's going on? One of the Baltic states is basically saying, by the winter, we're going to run out. And we don't have a plan, and we're not getting gas from anywhere else. So what does that mean? That means that people that live in Latvia who cook and heat and all of those things on gas, I guess they're going to freeze to death or something and starve or something. I guess they'll have to maybe gather wood. I mean, basically, you're looking at a country that's going from a industrialized country that will fall into, third world absurdity. And here's the bottom line. I mean, it's kind of almost like sometimes nature selects some people for, it's like you could say if um a particular animal or plant, if the environment changed, humans included, so that this animal or plant couldn't survive anymore, one could make an argument that the universe and nature selected that animal or plant for an end. I mean, that's one way to put it. It doesn't mean that like there was a board of directors somewhere in nature and they all sat around and they said, what do you think should go? Well, let's see, we've got a species here that's kind of a pain in the ass, really, and they're bothering us. What do you think? I don't know. I don't like this species over here. Okay. And the board of directors like clicked off which species would be selected and it was gone. That's not the way it works. That's a way of articulating a reality. And the reality is, particularly on this earth, all species come and go. The existence of species is transient, and even groups within that species can be transient. The whole species can be transient, right? It's here one day, it's gone the next. It's here for 1 million, 2 million, 100,000 years, then it's gone. Yeah, find a giant sloth anymore that was here years ago. Where you see tracks from dinosaurs, all kind of animals and plants that once existed that don't exist anymore. And one way to articulate that is nature selected them to be gone. Well, couldn't we argue that about the Latvians? If they start freezing to death because they run out, because, hey, we sure hate the Russians. What did they do? Recently, some of the Baltic states have come to the EU and they said, we need some money. Yeah, the EU will help them out. The EU's got lots of money, right? We need some money. Why is that? And they were like, well, because we have closed off our border with Russia and we made a lot of money dealing with Russia because it's like a superpower right next to us and we don't have that money coming in anymore. And so we're kind of like going broke. So EU, could you give us some money to make up for that? We did your bidding. And the EU's like, yeah, we'll give you some, but let's not get carried away here. We'll give it a few beans, but I don't know. We'll do the best we can. But not for so long. So, in other words, the leaders of those countries have sacrificed their economies at the altar of Russia hating, which is I think it's not. There's not. Let's not be angry at their leaders. Let's look at it and say that's a bad thing. Those people will suffer greatly. That we don't like that to see that happen. But you know what? That's a reality that has to happen. If you have those kind of leaders, they make guillotines, or you can make your own. There's ways that these things can be dealt with. Violence is not something I'm in favor of, but I recognize that, lions got to eat antelope, and you got to have violence for land. That's nature. For the lions the antelope's not dying of old age. The lion's going to go put the bite on him, and he's going to eat the antelope. There's violence in nature, and human beings are part of nature. So sometimes in this world, there are people who are led by people who they're not thrilled with, and though Garland might not like it, sometimes those people get to a point where they just can't take it anymore, and they start building guillotines and things like that, and all kinds of terrible things happen. And I'm suspecting that's the direction we're moving in Europe. I'm more than suspecting it. At this point, I'm guaranteeing that, if you've been watching me this channel for a long time, you know that I've been saying for a long time, since the beginning of this thing, I've been saying, when things get bad enough in Europe, there may be violence. When people wake up and realize what their leaders have done to them, there may be violence. I'm updating that just a smidgen. The maybe part, let's get that out of the way. Why? Because when you look at what their leaders doing, it's almost like they want violence. It's almost like, what is that book? Lenin, he wrote a book. What was it? The State and Revolution. The bottom line is this: these governments are creating an environment where revolution and violence are guaranteed. I don't care what form of revolution it is. I don't care if you call it right wing, left wing. I don't care what you call it, Marxism, snarksism. I don't care what you call it. When people wake up in what the hell country is this? Lithuania, Latvia, doesn't matter. And they're like, okay, we're out of gas. What do we need to do? Because you know what comes first? What comes first is we really have to dramatically cut down on our use of gas. Now, one of the things means is this, that if you have any companies that use gas, they got to stop working. So your jobs got to go because companies that use gas are going to have to cut back dramatically, which means they can't do whatever they're doing to produce stuff or whatever it is. Okay, fair enough. But that still just gives you maybe a few more weeks. And then at some point, you're going to tell people, we got to have dramatic cutbacks, extreme cutbacks. And people are going to be like, I don't want to cut back with so much, blah, blah, blah. And then at some point, people turn on the heat. Click, click, click. Hey, the furnace ain't coming on. It's weird. They turn on the stove. Click, 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 click. I don't smell gas. There's no gas coming out. What's going on? And the government will be on TV. Well, guys, we really hate the Russians. And we're feeling good that we cut off all gas from the Russians. We don't have to worry about that evil Russian gas anymore. That's the good news. Now we got a little bit of news that ain't quite so good. Our entire country's out of gas. And we don't foresee a future, not at least in this year or this winter, where actually there is gas. So however you're living, you're gonna have to change it because you ain't have this is going to be life with no gas. Cities, towns, everywhere, no gas. It looks like they're going to run out. 58% are full. It says there, according to Latvia, they may not be enough to see the Baltic nation through 3 months. Let's see, December, January, February. Might not make it through February. It's still cold in February. It's cold in March and April and even May. You got to have it. So they're saying we are going to run out of gas. Now, here's the other part of it. The price is going to go up. And if they can get replacement gas, the price is going to be unthinkable. So what they have done in their zeal to punish Russia, to disassociate themselves from Russia, is committed economic suicide. And to be honest with you, I ain't got a problem with it. As sad as that may sound, may not be nice or whatever, but I don't have a problem with it. Look, I live in the United States, and I don't want to see suffering in the United States. But if we do something like that, what's wrong with that? We pay the price. If right now, if I go out and find an icy creek right now and I jump into it, I'm going to get cold. I'm going to freeze. I'm probably going to die. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm probably going to freeze to death or close to it. Because the nature of the human body is if you jump in an icy creek, certain things are going to happen. That's physics. That's physics. The nature of if you make political decisions in an attempt to smite your gigantic neighbor who gives you energy at a very cheap price, and you decide you hate your neighbor so much that you don't want to take that energy at a cheap price, you shouldn't get it. And whatever happens to you is perfectly fine. It's natural. You've made that decision when you voted for people and you put people in and you continue to allow this to happen. You made that decision, and that's okay. And guess what? If it goes bad, you'll have to make a different decision, won't you? You'll have to make a different decision. And I think what we're seeing in Europe, where, okay, we got Macron at 11%, we got Keir Starmer at 18%, and Merz is now somewhere around 22%, right? I think what we're seeing is the effect of 4 years of these kinds of decisions start to reach its natural consequence, right? That what we're looking at is European people. I mean, think about this. I love the French. I got French friends, right? They voted for Macron. They didn't want some crazy people in, so they put Macron in, and they got Macron. Keir Starmer. I mean, I'm here. Guess what? I didn't vote for Trump. I sure as hell didn't vote for Kamala Harris. And to be frank, if somebody put a gun to my head and said you have to vote for one or the other or we'll kill you, I probably would have chose Trump over Harris simply because I believe Harris would have taken us to nuclear war and we'd all be dead. So I don't like either one of them. I don't mean like, forget it. I don't know them. I don't support either one of their political ideological positions. I don't believe either one of them would be good politicians, or even if they could, that they'd be able to do the right thing if they wanted to. But I don't vote for either one of those. So the people, I'll say this, in Europe, who recognized this and said, labor, the Tories, no. Okay, you know what? Fair enough. I'm being mean to those people if I say they're getting what they got, because they don't. They knew better and they didn't want it. For those people who voted for those two parties, who voted for Macron, and you thought you were going to get something different, a guy who was with the Rothschild Bank, sad. And here I am in America. Here, look, America is in a world of trouble. Now, here's the other thing about it too, and then I got to take another side of it. One could argue it's because you voted for Macron or Starmer, or because that guy won, so blame the people. One could also look at it and say, this is a system that naturally would go in this direction. This is a system that would present a Macron or a Starmer as an option for you to vote for, and not even a better option than that. This is a system that would present a Trump. I can say this: Trump didn't come into American politics. He came out of American politics. He was created by American politics. So one side of it could argue that people who put these people in office are getting what they got coming to them. The other could argue that we have a bastard of a system. And this system creates this. That is a system of financialized capital that is deliberately deindustrialized itself. And now this is what deindustrialization looks like. But I think the Europeans are ahead of the curve as far as the U.S. There's a number of things. As I've said, the U.S., I don't think we get now. People are like, the U.S. is going to get it, but I don't think we get it as bad as the Europeans. I don't think we get it as bad as the Europeans, simply because the U.S. has the capacity to regenerate in a way that the Europeans don't. Right? The Americans can produce their own energy and grow their own food in large numbers, and we got a lot of natural resources, where Europe is short. And they can grow some of their food, but they're real short on energy, so it doesn't have the natural resources necessarily that it needs. That's one thing. And I think that there is a different kind of culture in Europe than there is in the United States. I think the U.S. culture is a little more resistant to government, a little more suspicious of government, and that's coming out. And I think the European culture tends to be a little bit more of going along with the government and, going down to the last minute before you figure out that they're your enemies and they're trying to screw you. Where the Americans, I think, are a little more apprehensive and untrustworthy of the government early in the process. And to be quite frank, the earlier you are suspicious of a government in the West, the better. The sooner you're suspicious, the sooner you have an opportunity to take action that will mitigate their diabolical and devious deeds, that will leave you impoverished. So America's going to hurt. America's going to suffer. But I think America can come out of it better and sooner. Now, better and sooner could mean 20 years. It could mean 30 years. It could be 50 years. I don't know what it means, but it means better and sooner, because it has the potential to come out of it, where I don't think Europe even has the potential. I think Europe is spinning it into something that it doesn't necessarily have the potential to come out of. That what Europe is spinning into, poverty, misery, violence, all of the above, that it would have to have help. Like, for instance, how could Europe get out of this mess? Well, there's an easy way to get out of the mess, and that is Russian energy. But if I was the Russians, there's no way I'd go back to selling you energy in the same way that I was before, because I already figured this out. If I empower you, industrially, you're going to use that industrial power to come after me again. You've come after me over and over. I'm not setting you up to do it a third time. So if I am the Russians and these things start to, come around a bit, I would sell Europe enough energy to keep themselves warm, and not much more. And I wouldn't give them a penny discount ever. And I wouldn't open those pipelines back up. I'd say, nah, it's just too dangerous. I'd sell them all LNG because the LNG is more expensive. And I'd mark it up like the US. Look, if the US is marking it up 5 times, I'd mark it up 3.5. That's all. And so you're not going to get cheap energy anymore. You're not going to have industrial capacity like you did before, and you're not going to be able to threaten me like you did before. And I suspect that if Russia sells them gas at all, see, these people have recently, and this, I think this is a very good thing. The European leadership has now said, as of the 2027, we're no longer going to buy Russian energy of any type. Now, does that mean all that Russian energy, that washed Russian energy that they're buying through India? Because that's what they're doing. They're buying a lot through India. Does that mean that everybody knows it? Are they going to do it? Well, here's what I'll say about that. I think that the leaders in Europe are going to be replaced. And so I think the policy direction that Europe is going in now is going to be changed. I don't know if it's going to be reversed, but it's going to change again, either through political change or through the change of violence, one of that. But I think it's going to change. So the Europeans now are saying, as an example, just to show how absurd Europe is. One of the things that Europe is saying is we must be ready for war with Russia by, God knows, 2030. Let's see. There's something in here. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has claimed that the European Union is preparing for war with Russia and plans to be fully ready by 2030. Speaking at an anti-war rally on Saturday, Orban said that Europe was already making moves towards a direct military confrontation. He described a four-step process that typically leads to war: breaking off diplomatic relations, imposing sanctions, ending economic cooperation, and finally engaging in armed conflict. He said that most of these steps have already been taken. There is the official European Union position that by 2030 it must be ready for war, he said. He also stated that European countries are moving towards a war economy. Now, there's something else that you have to that I think you have to temper this with, and that is demonstrators across 90 cities have denounced the legal change in Germany in a move to revive conscription they see as laying the groundwork for full conscription. Thousands of demonstrators have marched in cities across Germany to protest Chancellor Friedrich Merz's plan to overhaul the country's military service system, accusing the government of laying the groundwork for forced mobilization. Rallies took place in around 90 cities: Berlin, Hamburg, Munich, and Cologne, both before and after the vote. Footage showed protesters chanting anti-war slogans and carrying banners reading, "No to conscription, we will not be cannon fodder, and your war without us." Protesters slammed the reform as recruitment of death and urged investment in education and welfare instead of weapons. So here's the thing about it. While the leaders are like, we're going to be prepared for war by 2030, the first issue they have is this: how in the hell are you going to drag a country into a war where they're just going to get nuked in an hour anyway, but you're going to drag them into a war when you have 22% approval rating? See, that's one of the things that you have to take into account when you look at all of this war talk, and that is they have very low approval rating. So here's what you have. You have countries that are economically in dire straits. Europe is in dire straits economically. Industrially, it's coming unraveled. Okay. Politically, the leaders are pretty much despised by the people and wholly discredited. Okay. So, how are you going to go to war? How are you going to go to war? How is the leadership going to say, okay, we're going to undertake an endeavor that is deadly, that is horrible, that will be devastating to our country, and 11% of the people are following the leader, right? I believe that the Kaja Kallases and the Macrons and the Merzes would like to do that. That's their plan. They're so insane. They're lunatics. They're goons. And they're like, okay, this is what we'll have to do. We hate the Russians so bad. We'll go to war with Russia. They're so desperate because they don't want to be exposed for their criminality and all the money that they've stolen, that they would love to do that. but I don't think they can. In the same way that, let's see here. Let me look. Just making sure I'm going to check on, let's see, VENE, Venezuela, and see what I get. Venezuela. Trump's threatened Maduro. That's all. So Trump is threatening Venezuela, right? But here's the problem. I think somewhere around 70% of Americans are in opposition to an attack on Venezuela. It's going to be hard for Trump to do it. And I've been on record for a while saying I don't think he'll do it. It's possible he might. I could be wrong, but I don't think he will, for numerous things, not the least of which being his coalition will start to unravel of support because they'll be furious because most of them don't want it. That there's no real military options there. I mean, what is he going to do? You don't think by now that the Venezuelans have moved everything from their bases, from anything they think would be a target, that they've cleared everything out? So what are you going to do? You're going to throw some weapons at most likely what are empty bases? And then, what then? Okay, we're going to fire 100 Tomahawks at Venezuela. Well, that ain't much. We'll fire another 100. That ain't much for a country that size, pal. Then what? Then what? You got 16,000 soldiers. Is that an expeditionary force that can attack a country the size of Germany and France combined? No, it's not. So what are your options then? You throw some long distance weapons at Venezuela. And as I've said, if they start throwing them back, they may hit something because they got a few things and you don't even know what they've got. So with 30% in favor of this conflict, Trump can't do it. And it ain't against, and they don't have nukes. And they don't have a more powerful army than us by a lot. So now you're going to go to countries and say, okay, things are kind of rough. We have led you to an impoverished state. We have led you to a state of complete economic misery, because that's the directions are going. Think about this. Okay. When Europe says we want to go to war with Russia by 2030, right? As their economy crumbles, their economy is crap now. London, go to London or Paris or where, Berlin, whatever, go these countries there. The cost of energy has, affected everything. It's very expensive to go to dinner. It's very expensive to buy things. It's very expensive to, Christmas gifts. Anything you want to buy is extremely expensive. People's life style is dramatically deteriorating right now. And you want to go to war with Russia by 2030. You're building something, right? You're building all these tanks, which you're not building. You're building all these airplanes, which you're not building. You're building all of these big guns and artillery, which you're not building. Because if you were really planning on going to war with Russia by 2030, your industry would be humming and you'd be building all of these things, but you ain't building them. So you're planning on going to war, but you would if you could, but you can't, so you won't. So we're planning on going to war. So we got to get started building tanks. When are you going to get started? We don't know. Why? Well, because we don't really have the steel or really the energy for the plants or really the money to buy the stuff we need. Plus, we're a little short on TNT. So even if we had the tanks, we wouldn't be able to build the artillery rounds we need to fight with them. So we don't have the money to build the tanks. We don't have the industry to build the tanks. We don't have the energy to run the industry if we had it. We don't have the TNT to make artillery. Doesn't sound like a good plan to go to war by 2030, does it? Doesn't sound like I'll put it like this. A political plan must have the foundational things behind it that allows you to execute a plan, right? For instance, when I was 20, I could have said, I want to plan to, to run 2 miles or 1 mile in a certain amount of time. And I could have picked the time, right? And at that time, I could have ran and worked towards it. Well, you know what? I have a back injury, so I can still get around and enjoy my life. But sometimes that back injury bothers me. I could think about setting a time for running a mile. I can walk a mile, but I can't run on hard surfaces anymore like I used to because I've got that back problem, right? It wouldn't be realistic based on the capabilities that I have. The capabilities that I have wouldn't have I used to love to play basketball. I say, I'm going to improve my ability to cut to the basket. I'm going to improve my foot speed and my eye-hand coordination. Then I'm going to cross people over and go behind the back and spinning moves or whatever the hell I wanted to do, learn how to do, right? When I was 20 or even 30 or even 40. Now, yeah, I've crossed 40 a few years back. And guess what? The old back ain't going to have me crossing nobody over. Go for a nice walk, maybe a jog. I can work out. I can ride my bike. I ain't crossing nobody over. And so a goal would be great, but I don't have it wouldn't be a realistic goal because I don't have the capability to do that, right? So here's my point when it comes to what's going to bring that all back to the Europe. Their goal is to be prepared to go to war with Russia by 2030, which would be an absurd goal in and of itself, since of course they're nuclear power. And for the most part, you ain't. You'd have to, a couple countries that got a few nukes, but they would be vaporized instantly. So what? But anyway, as absurd as that is, as ridiculous, as suicidal as that goal is, it's not aligned with their capabilities. They can't do it. They can't build the things they need. Now, add this. Their economies are deteriorating. So let's just say this. I say I'm going to buy a new Rolls Royce and I lose my job. I got no job. The guy says he's going to buy a new Rolls Royce and loses his job. And then you say, what are you going to do? And he says, next year, I'm going to buy 2 Rolls Royces. Well, you can't afford to buy one now because you just lost your job. So your plan to buy 2 next year is not aligned with your capabilities. You don't even have a job now. Your economic situation is deteriorating because you have bills and no money coming in. So to plan next year as though you would have lots of money coming in, unbelievable amounts of money coming in, when that's not realistic with what you're experiencing today. So my point being, Europe has leaders that are saying, we're going to buy 2 Rolls Royces next year when they just lost their job. We're going to pray, notwithstanding that their plan is one that will get the entire economic bloc nuked in about an hour. So the absurdity of their plan is that it's suicidal. The preposterous nature of their plan is that they don't have anything needed to enact that plan. It's just talk. Right now, we're preparing for war with Russia, right? Okay. Latvia, whoever the hell it is, right? Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, whichever one of those poor bastards who are about to freeze to friggin' death, right? Okay. They are part of the plan. They're gearing up for war with Russia by 2020. But if you watch the beginning of this video, they just said, we do not have enough gas for the next 3 months. Let's put those two things together and try to do some deductive reasoning as to how well they'll be able to execute their 2030 plan. War with Russia requires a lot of things. Now, since you are on the front war with Russia and you're a tiny little country, you're not even a speed bump. They'll flatten you so fast you won't even know you existed. But okay, forget that. You still have a plan that you're going to take Russia out. How does that plan get around the reality that you don't have enough gas to keep your citizens warm for the next 3 years? Let's put those two things together. Okay? Here's one side of your future, right? Your planning, your outlook for your country. 4 years from now, 3.5 years, 3 years from now, we must be prepared to go to war with a nuclear superpower on our border. We got like 1.5 million people in our country. They got 150 million. Okay? We can see some holes in that. Clearly, not pointing any fingers. I'm just saying maybe those plans could have been done better. Now, but that's your plan. That's what it is. Let's align it with what you got right now. You don't have enough gas to keep yourself warm for the next couple of months. Don't you think you should be figuring out how to keep your people warm for the next 3 months? Don't you think perhaps you should put this suicidal war plans on hold and say, we really want to go to war with those evil Ruskies. But first, I guess we'd probably better figure out how we don't freeze to death, because that could, I don't know, be a speed bump. That could slow us up in our plan to take out Russia. If our people are frozen, they're probably going to overthrow the country and cut our freaking heads off. Or at least it's a possibility. There we have it. That's where we are. We've got a country that the world is looking at saying, what the hell is wrong with these people? I think that's what the world's doing. Now, America is a country that God knows we've got our issues. Look at our leadership. Pete Hegseth. I had a chief of police that remind me of Pete Hegseth. The chief of police is a full bird, as they say, colonel, right? He's a colonel. And we had a guy who was retired from another police department as a corporal. He never even made sergeant. For whatever reason, the governor decided to appoint this guy who only made corporal. He never even made sergeant, as a colonel, as the chief of police. And there were those of us who said, that guy's in over his head. And man, is he going to have a fall? Well, guess what happened? He had no clue how to administrate a police department. And I worked under him or for him. And I could see it, and I'm like, he doesn't understand that he's an administrator now. He's got the mind and the thought process of a corporal, but he's in a colonel's position, and he flopped really, really bad. Nothing against him. Seemed like a decent enough guy. I'm saying he had some problems. He got in a little bit of trouble, but it wasn't what happened with his job wasn't his fault. He didn't have the proper training to do that job, right? And there's Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth acts like a grunt. He does. He acts like the lowest guy on the totem pole in the military, doing push-ups and sit-ups and running. That's not what the Secretary of Defense does, or Secretary of War, or Foreign Minister, or Defense Minister, or whatever country you call him. You're not going to see. I don't remember seeing Sergei Shoigu jogging with the troops, doing a bunch of sit-ups, yelling "hoorah." Pete Hegseth doesn't come across as a very classy leader. He comes across as a grunt guy who'd be probably great to have a beer with. You just got to make sure if you're an administrator, you hold people like that back, because they'll get you in trouble. That's a fact. You have people who are aggressive, but they have to be, you got to yank their chain because they're too aggressive and they don't understand the complexities of administration, and they'll get themselves and you in a lot of trouble. Trust me, I've had people that work for me like that in law enforcement. But Hegseth, he ain't that guy. He don't get it. He just, okay, I'm Secretary of Defense, hoorah! And he goes out here and he does what a platoon leader or something would do, and then he ends up humiliating the entire country, and it's a sad state of affairs. But that's the guy that we have in charge, because Donald Trump is a different version of Pete Hegseth, in my opinion. He's a different version of Pete Hegseth. He's a guy who oversimplifies things. That's what we're talking about here. People who have very complex issues and they oversimplify them, right? One of the ways I put it, and I wouldn't say it's appropriate here, but I've often said the most dangerous person in the world is an idiot who thinks he's a genius. Okay, that again, it implies intellectual capacity. I'd put it a different way, and that is, a dangerous person is a person who's out of their depth, a person who's given a job to do. Hey, Garland, what are you going to do? Well, I just got a job managing the computer network for a multinational corporation. Well, you know what? I didn't have the technical expertise to do that. And if you put me in charge of that, you're going to have some real serious problems if I am unwise enough to think that I can do it. Part of wisdom is knowing your limitations. So if somebody said, Garland, we're giving you a job. Okay, great. What is it? Well, JP Morgan, or one of these other crooked banks, HSBC, has decided they need someone to manage their networks. And we're going to give you $1 million a year to do it. And I would say, well, I really appreciate the offer for $1 million, but I don't know how to do it. There are things I can do. How about security? I can help them with that. There are a lot of things, anti-terrorism stuff, trained there. There's all kinds of stuff I got training on. And I can handle the basics of my computer and the things I need to do. But I know my limits, and I know what capacities I have, and wisdom, the knowledge, and intellect. Part of it is recognizing your limits. So you take a Kaja Kallas. Again, as I said, she is so perfect for the EU because She's very arrogant. She comes across as a person who thinks the EU is, it's like we're superior to everybody in the world. Well, we better go talk to China. Just because I come from a country the size of a freaking postage stamp doesn't mean that I can't go to China and order them around and they have to listen to me. You better do what we say, China. And China's like, no, no, she didn't land in Beijing and say that. She doesn't understand who we are. But read the national security strategy that Trump just wrote. If you want to understand people who don't, let me see. Watch this. Okay. Listen to this. We must encourage Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia, Canada, Mexico, and other prominent nations in adopting trade policies that help rebalance China's economy toward household consumption. Household consumption, right? So we've got to force the other countries to only buy things like irons and, I don't know, ironing boards, maybe chairs, rugs. Rugs might be okay. Household consumption. The belief that you have the power to do that, that all you have to do is say to, now maybe Europe may, some of these other countries, but you think Mexico, other prominent nations, you think all of these nations are just going to say, oh, so we buy all our computers, we buy military stuff, we buy our technological stuff. Oh boy, we buy phones. Our people all got Huawei phones and computers and all these things. You know what? We're only going to buy irons from now on, and maybe hangers and small household goods. You think that you have the ability in this world to force other countries to do that? Good luck trying. So my point is, as absurd as it is, that the Europeans think they can get ready for war without anything, that they need to do it, that they think that they can go to China and tell China what to do. Look at the US. The US thinks we can control the whole world and tell everybody what to buy. They're just a junior version of us. They're just every bit as stupid as the United States leadership. They're just much weaker. Actually, they're worse, really, because what you have is this. You have the neoliberals, which are, which I would call this, let's go with another term, the ultra liberals, because right now everybody's saying this thing's got to, a lot of people are. Elon Musk is saying it's time for to end this thing. A lot of people are saying, not that I'm a Musk fan, but a lot of people are saying it's time to end this European thing. It's obvious what it is. It's fascism. It's obvious what it is. It's an umbrella operation for corruption and theft. And it is there deliberately to steal any sovereignty from every country. It's now it's obvious what it is. I mean, literally, when a country in Europe says, I don't want to do something, they say, well, sanction it. Yeah, you are. Remember this? If countries, von der Leyen says, well, if the countries don't do what we like, we have tools. Tools. They're a bunch of fascists. They're the ultra liberal fascists. In the same way that people traditionally would say, they talk about the right wing with fascism, they'd say ultra nationalist, right? They're ultra nationalist fascists, right? Okay. It's an extreme version of nationalism was considered fascism. And I mean, I'm not going to argue that or get into the intricate details of that point. But my point is this. When I look at what's going on in Europe, when I look at the Biden administration, when I look at the totalitarian and authoritarian nature of these people, what I see is this. You can argue that ultranationalism is fascism, but then you have to also argue that ultraliberalism is fascism, right? Ultraliberalism. Liberalism, when threatened, when liberalism is threatened to lose its power, when things start to go south with liberalism, it's fascist. And now what we've got is the ultra liberal fascist in Europe, who are, to some extent, they've gotten on the bad side of what I would call the faux populists, the Trump people. Is a fake populist movement, and all you have to do is read the. Now, I'm not saying what the people in the Trump movement or the Trump voters want or don't want. I'm just saying the leadership of the Trump movement, of the MAGA movement, are faux fake populists because they're just writing this. If you read the national security strategy, they hate the liberals, ultra liberals, and they make some. Here's the interesting thing: they make some valid gripes and complaints about them, some valid accusations and assertions about the ultra liberals. Absolutely, but that doesn't mean that they're real populists. They're no, because they're still pushing for. I mean, literally, they put the Wolfowitz doctrine in here, the Wolfowitz doctrine, that no state can rise enough to anywhere in the world, no state can become powerful enough to challenge our dominant position. So how's that populism? We have to rule the world. Well, isn't that kind of the definition of globalism? Isn't that kind of a fascist definition? So while the Trump people are like, yes, we're populist, except that ruling of the world for the top 0.001% is at the top of our list. Well, those two things don't align, do they? They don't align at all. So my point is that what is the leadership in America is a fake populist. They claim that we're here for free speech. Well, try saying something about Israel they don't like. That ain't going to work. Something about Zionism they don't like. That ain't going to work. Right? So it's a faux populism versus ultra liberalism. That's what we have. And, I make this argument: if people have a choice between liberalism, ultra liberalism, whatever it is, and a populism, of something that looks like populism, they're always going to take the populism. It looks like populism. Like I said, it ain't even really populism. It's a faux populism. It looks like populism. But when you look at it, what you have is what you have is something in Europe that looks really bad. And it is really bad. And what you have something in the US that looks really bad, but it doesn't look quite as bad as Europe. Right? In that they're like, well, we got to get out. We got to make friends with Russia. Okay. Great. Wonderful. But of course, then they go on to say that we can't allow any country to think about this. We think it's great for us to make friends with Russia. That's in the national security strategy, right? We got to be friends with Russia, right? But then you say we cannot allow any country to rise and become powerful enough that they challenge our domination of any nationally or even regionally. So what you're saying is we have to be friends with Russia, but Russia's powerful enough, as we see in Ukraine, to challenge our domination. Well, how can I align? I want to be friends with Russia, but I can't allow anybody to be as powerful as Russia is even right now, which says to Russia, don't trust these people. They're saying they want to be friends with you, but only, the old saying, the Minsk. What was the Minsk version? The Minsk agreement about? They admitted what it was about. It was about putting Russia on hold until we could get powerful enough to go to war with them again. So when they say we want to make friends with Russia, we want to do business with Russia, what does that really mean? Russia's not stupid. Russia knows what it means. Let's put this war with Russia on hold until we can be in a situation where we can go after them again, because they have risen clearly. They have done something that our national security strategy says is not allowed. And what is that? They have risen to become powerful enough to challenge our domination, but not just regionally, worldwide. Well, we can't have that, can we? So the United States populism is a globalism that says we must rule the world. It goes on to say, and there's a national security strategy, that we must strengthen our banking situation so that we'll have leverage. We must strengthen our banks so that we can use our banks as a weapon. Now, what's going on over in Europe? Okay, it is strengthen our banks so we can use our banks as a weapon, right? Okay, the Europeans ain't even there. The Europeans are like, okay, let's do something that puts money in our pockets now, but it'll destroy our banking system. But we're not wise enough to even take that into account. We're like, we want to get the Russians and we need this money now. Let's get all this money. What's going to destroy our banking system? I don't understand the point. we can get the money, and then we can continue fighting with the Russians, but the money, we'll take the money out of Euroclear that allows us to fight with the Russians. Yeah, well, but it'll destroy our economy in the long run. What the long run? Dude, I got 11% approval rating. There ain't no long run for me. That's where the Russians are. I mean, excuse me, that's where the Europeans are. So the Russians are sitting there, the Chinese are sitting there, they're all getting stronger, and they're all run by, see, here's the deal. I think what we're looking at is countries that are run by people that you might not even agree with ideologically, one way or the other. You may say Viktor Orban's too far to the right. You may say Robert Fico is too far to the left, or Lukashenko is, these guys are socialists, whatever. I don't care what you say. I have my own beliefs. But what you can't say is they're not taking into account the needs of the populations of their countries that they represent, that they are actually trying to represent the populations of their countries. But whether they're doing a good job of it or not, they're making some kind of an effort to do it. Whereas the leadership in Europe is completely, totally isolated, intentionally isolated from the people in their country. And when you look at the stupidity, when you look at the absurdity, when you look at the ridiculous nature of Kaja Kallas, when you look at her and she's like, her eyes always like this. Yes, the Russians. We must stop the Russians. What do you think? We're screwed, Kaja Kallas. Our economy's going. We must stop the Russians. The only thing that she talks about all the time, her eyes look like somebody stuck. She just stuck her finger in a socket, and she says something about Russia. That's the only value she has, to say something about Russia. Nothing else. There's nothing else on her agenda. There's nothing else that was ever supposed to be on her agenda. But it's like, you know what she reminds me of? Back in the day, we had these GI Joes, and there was all kinds of toys, and girls had dolls, right? And they had a little string that you would pull, and it might have about 3 different recordings, and you pull a string. Hi, and the string would go in. My name is Jody. Are you having fun today? I'd like some water. Do you have water? Hi, my name is Jody. She had about 3 things to say, and you pull it, and she would say whatever those recordings were in a row, right? And they had different toys that you do that. You pull it, and that's what it says. That's all Kaja Kallas is. Russia, they're having hybrid warfare against us. We must be ready to fight Russia by 2030. We need more money to fight Russia, because Russia's doing bad things. That's it. She's got 3 or 4 things to say, and it's all Russia. And if you would say to her, I think we need to have a long and serious talk about prosperity in Estonia, about the future for Estonians, about the economy of Estonia, and how we could strengthen it, and how we can improve the lives of everyday Estonians. She'd look at you like you were crazy, and she'd say, "Boy, you work for Putin now?" Because she doesn't have another thing to say. Oh, so you're working for Putin? I don't understand. I want to talk about Estonians. Yeah, that Putin wants to talk about Estonians too. So yeah, right now we got hybrid drones flying over. We got literally the British. Literally, the British have a story now, and what they're saying is that the Russians have a spy ship that's off the coast of Russia, and when British planes flew over, they shine lasers in the cockpit. That's hybrid warfare. So I'm supposed to believe that the Russians went down to like a local office supply store and bought a laser pointer that you can use to point on your blackboard with. When I used to teach at the college, I had a laser pointer. All right, there, young dude, look at that, boom, there we go. And I'm pointing along this and that, right? Okay, I'm supposed to believe they did that, and their great way of disrupting the Brits, hybrid warfare, going after NATO, is to point a laser pointer at the cockpit of a British plane. And the Brits are like, we can't put up with this. This is absurd. This is ridiculous. Let's see. I'm going to find an article. Watch this. Russian spy ship laser. UPI. An alleged, we don't even have a Russian spy ship. We got an alleged one. That's the worst kind. An alleged Russian spy ship near British waters deployed lasers in order to impede Royal Air Force pilots attempting to monitor the ship. The vessel named Yantar made its second known visit this year north of Scotland, entered British waters in the last few weeks. Healy said officials were taking Russia's deeply dangerous maritime moves extremely seriously. On Wednesday, the British ministry confirmed the Royal Navy deployed a frigate ship and deployed aircraft to track the vessel's every move. During which the Yantar directed light lasers at our pilots. Oh my God. Healy said the ship was, quote, designed for gathering intelligence and mapping our undersea cables, for instance, Nord Stream, right? So the Brits now are saying, "Well, the Russians are trouble, man. They got a couple of laser pointers from the local supply store, probably like docked in London, walked up the street to the local office, a depot. Hey, you got any laser pointers? We got one left. That's be £6. £6? Are you out of your mind? All I got is rubles. All right, I tell you what, we'll give it to you for £8. All right, here's an extra couple pounds. It's all in rubles. Thanks a lot. Off they go. What are you doing? Well, we got a spy ship tied out, and there's Brits flying over us. We need something to shine in our eyes. I mean, it's not like we could shoot them down with missiles or anything. We don't have air defense systems. We'll just do. Yeah, that's it. That's an international situation we're trying to create. The Russians then got on their planes, buzzed out of the harbor, sat up in offshore, and waited for a British plane. At which time they went click. Ah, and the Brits went, no, God, I'm blind. I can't see. Somebody signed up. 8-pound laser in my eyes. Really. That's the absurdity. That is Europe, my friends. That is ultra-liberalism, my friends. Pure stupidity. Now, could we take into account possibly the people in Europe, in London, can't afford to pay their energy bills? Food's overpriced. They can't afford rent. Nah, that's not important. What's important now? It's an assertion, an allegation that not a Russian spy ship, an alleged Russian spy ship, which is the worst kind, is alleged to have shined a laser in an RAF pilot's face. The whole thing is a joke. That's what we're up against. That's what we're dealing with here. Kaja Kallas should be in charge of an organization like that, of a block that would have the gall to write an article like that. Kaja Kallas should be. In fact, here's what I'm thinking. Realistically, what should happen is von der Leyen should resign and put Kallas in charge, because she is the purest example of these people. She's over the top. She completely ignores the needs of the people, and she just wants to babble about how bad Russia is all the time. And now that the U.S. has basically said, you know what, we want to try to rule the world, and we can't do that if we're tied down in Ukraine. Let me read the national security strategy to you as I see it. We still want to rule the world, but we've lost a war, and it's kind of catastrophic and humiliation to the Russians in Ukraine, and we got to sneak out so we can try to go steal everything that ain't nailed down in South America and hassle the crap out of the Chinese, but we don't really know what the hell we're doing. That's the way I read it. Oh, by the way, we hate the damn Europeans. They're a pain in the ass. There you go. I just read the national security strategy to you. There it is in a nutshell. So that being said, Kaja Kallas is a different iteration of Pete Hegseth, a person who is in way over their head and just doesn't have the capacity to do their job. And that's the reason they're there, and which only means that calamity awaits them. I think she should stay there. I think that the days of the EU are numbered. I think the European people don't have any agency. They don't have any political ways to fix the EU or anything else, politically speaking. But if you don't give me a way to address this politically, then it will be addressed kinetically. That's why I say Europe is heading for violence. And I mean the kind of bottom-up violence wherein, like, there's attacks on politicians, there's violence towards politics. I'm not happy about that. But when you cut off all methods for the people to address their concerns, they'll make up a method on their own. And I think that's the direction we're going. Anyway, thanks a lot, everybody. Let me look. I think we may have some let me look for super chats. And if I saw one, there's another one. Let's go. We're into the super chats. Love you so, Garland. You're the realist. Thoughts on if USA is propping up Japan to be its proxy to start a war with China? Yes. Something feels fishy. Yes. Happy Sunday. Oh yeah. Yeah. The U.S. That's clearly the U.S. is realized, and if you read the national security strategy, you can see it's in there. They're like, yes, we must get our allies prepared. Blah blah blah. So it's the Ukraination of Ukrainization of Japan, and now they're like, okay, well, crap, we can't fight friggin' China. We couldn't even begin to. But if we can get Japan and China fighting, ideally, we can get China to flatten Japan and destroy all of their economic and industrial capability. Number one. So that's one competitor out of the way. Think about this. The U.S. and John Bolton's book said Russia, China, Europe. Europe is a big problem for us because they have economic and industrial capability in their competitor. So you look at Europe and you say, we couldn't get rid of Russia as a competitor, but we got rid of Europe as a competitor, and they're buying stuff, gas from us. So we were successful there. I mean, we got rid of one major bloc and a competitor, so there was success there, right? Then you look at in Asia and you say, we got China. Now, South Korea, tremendous industrial capacity. Not so much Philippines, but some. And then you say Japan, tremendous industrial capacity. Now, I can't stop China, but I can drag China into a war with them, and I can get South Korea and Japan destroyed. And what have I done? I've destroyed South Korea's industrial capacity. I've destroyed Japan's industrial capacity. I've destroyed Europe's industrial capacity. So what? Russia and China are standing. That's fine. I just had to destroy massive amounts of industrial capacity and economic capacity so that I became powerful again. What do I care if it's China, or I'll say Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, maybe a couple others, Singapore, whoever the hell I could throw in there, get theirs all destroyed. Now I can suck India into a war with Pakistan, maybe get India's industrial capacity destroyed. And so now I got Japan, I got South Korea, I got India, I got Europe, right? All of their industrial capacities, economic capacities, banking capacities wiped out. Okay, I'm good with that. I'm fine. I just had to get rid of some of this competition, and I got rid of as much of it as I could. And I couldn't really get rid of Russia and China, but I could throw these people at Russia and China, hoping that when I get Russia and China to wipe out Europe and Asia's industrial capacity, that they'll at least be weakened by having to do that. So now I'm the strongest guy. They're weaker because they had to fight those. They flattened them, so they're gone, and I'm the only one left that wasn't in a fight. In a way, if you look at it from the perspective of the United States, is I get China to fight its neighbors. I get Russia to fight its neighbors. I sit back here and don't fight anybody, and everybody's weaker. Its neighbors are crushed. It's weaker. I'm the only one that didn't get touched. That's the game. It's so obvious. Anyway, let's keep going. Next, great questions. Love your perspective, always keeping us up to date with logic and facts. Thank you, Mr. Garland. Why, thank you. Rebus return. All right, let's see what else we got. I don't see Kaja Kallas on here. Here we go. Ivan here. They've changed my name. Tried to send snail mail. Super complicated from Canada these days. Anyways, thanks for the great work. Thanks a lot, Ivan. Certainly appreciate it. Wow, that's weird that they won't let you send to my P.O. box. And for those, it's right across the bottom. Let me keep going. Thank you very much. All right. So thanks, everybody. And there's my P.O. box. If you want to send a letter, if you want to send a donation, if you want to send a card, whatever, a book, you name it, right there is great. Also, I want to thank everybody, all of my Patreon people. If you can afford to become a Patreon member, I certainly appreciate it. If you can afford to donate on PayPal, buy me a coffee, or anything like that, Cash App, that's highly appreciated. And I will add this. I thank everybody who helps keep the show going. And please, if you can, definitely become a part of the show by being a subscriber. You can become a channel member, but you must share this on all your social media platforms. I'm out.